All right, so it is 4:02. I know it's kind of an odd number, but we are going to go ahead and get started this afternoon. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who is here. I know you guys are coming from all over the world, and I just wanted to introduce myself. So my name is Brianna Hopper, and on behalf of the entire Valiantys and Atlassian teams, we wanted to say thank you for joining us for today's historical attempt to set a Guinness World Record for the most users on a software lesson. So before we get started in the training with Joshua, let's take a moment to hear from our Guinness World Records adjudicator, Andy Glass.
I'd like to extend an official welcome on behalf of Guinness World Records. My name is Andy Glass, one of the GWR experts whose job it is to measure, officiate, and judge the thousands of record attempts that are made each year. I'm excited to adjudicate this record attempt for you.
Here at the Americas office, we're in the business of record breaking. We have a team of highly trained adjudicators to help keep track of the 50,000 records we have on our database. Valiantys and Atlassian will be attempting the Guinness World Records title for the most users in a software video lesson. If successful, you will join the elite group of Guinness World Records title holders.
Achieving a Guinness World Records title is no easy task. It is extremely important that all of the official record guidelines are followed rigorously. If these guidelines are not followed, the attempt will be disqualified.
The guidelines for the Guinness World Records title for the most users in a software video lesson are as follows. The topics covered in the lesson must be related to the study and methodologies of a specific computer program. The lesson content must last for a minimum of 30 minutes. In order to be counted towards the final total, each participant must attend the video call, complete the test, and submit it back to the organizer. The record to beat is 500 participants. If the guidelines are successfully followed and the current record is surpassed, Valiantys and Atlassian will become the new Guinness World Records title holder.
The team at Guinness World Records will make the final decision on the validation of your attempt and determine whether you've been successful. I will be back later to let you know the official results.
All right, so I don't know about you guys, but I am ready to beat this record. So as you heard from Andy, there are a few guidelines that must be met to meet today's record. So everyone who joins must submit the provided short quiz that I will release at the end of today's session. But rest assured, this is not a test of your knowledge, but is verification of your attendance. It doesn't matter if you get them right, except for your name and your email if you want to be eligible to receive that prize. And speaking of the prize, the first 500 people to submit the quiz will receive a special thank you gift for joining us in today's historical moment. So now I am going to launch a poll, and I ask you all to please answer those questions and acknowledge that you understand these guidelines. All right, so while that is running, I do want to go over how we will handle questions today. So as you all know, there is a lot of us on here today, so we're going to utilize the Q&A feature on Zoom to address as many questions as possible. If you have any of those questions, if you have issues, please feel free to use that to communicate with us, and we will be sure to get back to you as soon as we can. If you do need any assistance beyond that, please feel free to email our training email at training.na@valiantys.com. I'm going to put that in the chat in case anyone needs it. And like I said, if you have any questions beyond the Q&A features, please feel free to reach out. We've got a team manning that, and we will be in contact with you as soon as we can. So now that we have an understanding of how we can all work together to set this record today, I'm going to pass this off to our Valiantys expert, Joshua Dimitri, and he's going to dive deep into Atlassian's hottest artificial intelligence tool, Rovo. Joshua, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Dimitri. I am a Principal Solutions Architect at Valiantys. I'm here to talk to you about Rovo and really show you some examples of how to utilize Rovo in a way that's going to accelerate what you're doing in your businesses today. So I'm going to go ahead and get my screen sharing, and we'll just go ahead and jump right in. All right, so I want to start with a little bit of maybe some background on what Rovo is to begin with, right? So when we're talking about Rovo and AI, obviously there are a lot of buzzwords out there, a lot of things to talk about, and kind of everyone's wanting to integrate AI into their various different platforms. So Rovo is going to be one of the offerings from Atlassian to integrate AI across really not only the Atlassian tools, but the intent of Rovo is to tie everything together in your organization and allow you to use AI to accelerate the things that you're already doing in the processes that exist today. So our goal with Rovo is to allow you to build tools and create processes and create workflows that are going to accelerate everything you're doing, create more value, and basically allow you to customize the way that you utilize AI in your environment. So let's go ahead and just jump into some of the main feature areas of Rovo. The way that I like to describe the main areas that Rovo features land in are that there are three main feature areas. It's going to be Rovo Search, Rovo Chat, and Rovo Agents. And the first two of those, Search and Chat, are essentially going to be the almost like works out of the box type of features. It's going to be, for an example here, this is Rovo Search. If I go in and ask it something like this previous question I asked, which is find articles about our legal team, it's essentially going to go and search in a kind of normal looking interface for a search, but the data that it's searching through is going to be all of the information across the entire organization. So Rovo Search as a feature is essentially similar to the concept of like an enterprise search, where the goal is to take the data across the entire organization and give you a single search bar to find that information. So if you have Jira projects and Confluence knowledge bases, and actually if you even have tools outside of Atlassian where you also want to get that information, and I'll show you how to do that here in a second, you can use Rovo Search to find that information quickly. It gives me a quick little AI overview while also giving me kind of a list of all the responses that might be related to our legal team in this scenario, right? So I have all of these different documents or projects that I can now jump into. I can sort by the different tools. And you'll even notice that I have things like Microsoft SharePoint and Figma as options that I could connect here as well. And that brings us into where these feature areas, these different areas that Rovo adds value, really go beyond the purpose of just our Atlassian tools. We're trying to put together everything in the organization, and that's where things like Rovo connectors come into play. So I want to talk a little bit about those because I think it's important to understand how connectors work with both Rovo Search and really the rest of our platform. If I go to this page here from Atlassian, this is a page of basically all of the tools that currently have built-in connectors for Rovo. So when we talk about especially search and like enterprise-wide searching, these are the tools that out of the box you can create integrations with, and essentially just go through admin screens on both of those tools, and it's going to be able to allow anyone accessing your Rovo agents or Rovo Search or chat to get information from your Atlassian tools, but also from tools like, say, Google Drive or Microsoft Teams. You can even pull like the conversations people are having in Teams as a database of knowledge to pull from. So lots of different possibilities here. This list is always expanding. And in the future, we're going to see more and more ways for us to connect our internal tools in our organizations beyond just these other SaaS tools that exist out there as well. But this is going to really start to drive home the fact that Rovo is intending to connect the entire organization, not just the Atlassian tools, but everything across the org. So going back into search, this is where that value is going to be seen in the first place, right? I can search everything across the entire organization from one search bar. But where does that take us for Rovo Chat, which is that second feature area of Rovo that I was talking about? So if I go ahead and hit this button here at the top right, this chat button is going to show up on your instance whenever you enable Rovo. And you'll notice I'm in Atlassian Home right now, but really this chat button will show up on any Atlassian tool that you're using. So if I were in Jira or Confluence, it would also show up here where I have this chat button and can go and click on it and pull up my Rovo Chat along with the other features we're going to be talking about here as well. So Rovo Chat is essentially going to be a way for us to interact with Rovo in a particular way, right? So we're talking about a chat-based interface of I want to basically talk to Rovo as if it is a a teammate or some sort of entity that I can have a conversation with. This is going to be very familiar for anyone who's used something like ChatGPT or kind of these other AI tools that are out there. The chatbot interface is kind of the first one that really blew up and became a big thing that people are using day to day in their work. And so Rovo Chat by default is just kind of this general chat that has knowledge of just general things that the AI models behind the scenes are trained on, so like ChatGPT, but it also has direct knowledge and access to everything in your Atlassian tools and everything in your Rovo connectors, like I was talking about before. So essentially going to be a way to, similar to Rovo Search, you're going to get the same content, but be able to have a conversation back and forth with Rovo about that content. You'll not even notice that from Rovo Search, I had an open chat button that takes me directly into the chat screen, and it would actually have a further conversation about these articles of our legal team. Now, I'm not going to spend as much time in Rovo Search and Rovo Chat, just because these are tools that, for the most part, you turn them on, and in the instance, they just work. You have access to everything across Rovo Chat, and it's going to have all the information it needs. And Rovo Search is going to just work as a search box that gives you more information than you've ever had access to from that search box before. But where this really leads us into is going to be where we talk about Rovo Agents. And I'm going to spend most of the time today talking about Rovo Agents, because this is where a lot of the customization and the tools you're going to build and all the things that you're going to want to understand how to create in your instance will take place. So agents are going to be essentially a way for us to almost like assign a persona to Rovo. So if I go in here and say, you know, hey, I want to use HR assistant. This is an agent on my list of agents that was in this little browse Rovo agents button on my on my little panel here. And this HR assistant is essentially a persona for Rovo that I can now chat with. So in Rovo Chat, I can pull up my HR assistant agent and ask it questions such as, you know, what is our vacation policy? And if I ask it a question like this, what it's going to do is search through the knowledge base that it has for our vacation policy and give me an answer based off of that. So you'll notice it says 15 paid vacation days per year. This is actually coming straight from documentation that it will now give me a link to as well. And if I open this up, what we'll notice is it is a Confluence page that has essentially a list of all of our policies for HR. This would be an example of where, let's say you have a particular use case like HR, and you have a knowledge base for all of your HR information. Maybe you even have things in Teams chats, or you have you know, kind of disparate areas in your organization where you're managing all this data, but you want to use Rovo to connect it all. You can add all that information into a Rovo agent and kind of apply this persona to it, such as this HR assistant. And in that scenario now, I can get the direct information that I need if I'm asking questions about the HR knowledge base or what we know from HR policies. So one of the value points of agents is going to be that we're going to be able to kind of narrow down the scope of what data we have access to, and that's going to allow us to create these personas. So the HR assistant here is actually behind the scenes restricted to only pull information from this space for our HR knowledge base. So it's only going to show information that came from the correct place where it has the correct answers, even if we had other places in the environment that were trying to say that we had different numbers of vacation days. It's only going to pull from that one location. And we're going to build a couple agents here together that will do the same thing, kind of restrict their knowledge down to only what's important and what's correct. And that's going to be one of the big values of agents, is being able to control a lot of how we interact with them and that persona on top of Rovo. So I want to really just go from there and jump right into the meat of our content, which is going to be actually building some Rovo agents together, and starting by talking about what is, you know, the idea of a custom Rovo agent, right? So we talked about what is an agent from this persona perspective, but what makes up an agent? How do we build that agent? How do we define the ways that we're going to interact with it? And how do we essentially track not only what information it has access to, but what information is going to matter the most to the user? So change the way it gets shown to the user and the perspective of that data potentially. So let's just go ahead and jump into that process, and I'll show you how to create an agent of your own. So if we go into my browse agents list, there's this create button that will show up here. And if I hit that create button, what I'm going to see is it's going to pull me into this screen where I'll be able to create a Rovo agent. It's going to start from this page that shows kind of like a, almost an AI chat interface again, where you can ask AI to help you start creating an agent. Could be a valuable thing if you're just kind of getting started and want to, look through that process a bit. But what I tend to do is go ahead and hit this skip to manual setup button. And I just want to walk through what are the components of something that is, happening in our environment for a Rovo agent, right? How do we control a Rovo agent and the way it has access to different pieces of data? So if I go ahead and go look at my identity, this is the first section of a Rovo agent. This is where that idea of a persona being given to Rovo really starts to matter. So I want to give it a name and I want to give it a description, and I'm going to start from there. So really at this point, I'd want to have a bit of an idea of, what is the type of agent that I want to build and what is the purpose of it going to be so that I know how to give it this persona. So let's go ahead and think of an example, and I've got one kind of queued up here where I'm going to pull up this board from this form tracker project. And essentially what I've laid out here is, let's say we're a financial services organization and we have different customers that are filling out different forms for, maybe an application for something or some like legal form on a loan they're taking out maybe. And we have all these different forms being tracked, but let's say that over time, our team that's tracking all this information and putting it on this Jira board and trying to keep track of all these different forms hasn't done necessarily the best job historically of categorizing them into which form that's being filled out. And most of the data is pretty unstructured, right? If I look at all these tickets, I've actually opened up a work item. All that I'm going to see here is a summary, and I actually intentionally left very little information here. Basically, this is similar to if you had a team that maybe had some legacy data that was just not very well structured, or it's your current data and you just have a lot of different people entering data in different formats and different ways. Some of these say that, Mr. Hernandez is filling out this form versus is working on or having a dash there, right? These are all different formats, and they have the same information, but in different ways. So I want to create an agent that helps me to understand which customers of mine in this project are filling out the same form. So I'm going to go ahead and build an agent to do that. So it's going to be all about forms, and the name that we've chosen is going to be formerly. So I'm going to go ahead and call this the formerly agent, and it's going to be all about kind of getting information about particular forms. Give it a name, go ahead and give it a description as well. So I want to say an agent that will help find all the customers working on a particular form. And that's going to be my persona or identity. You might want to add some more to the description, potentially. Depends on kind of how complex the agent's going to be. But the most important part of this is going to be this next step here, which is instructions. So once I've given it that identity, what I want to do is tell the agent how to behave, right? I want to tell this AI, Rovo agent, how it's going to process information. And instructions is going to be the place to do that. So instructions will be that section of our Rovo creation process that tells the agent how to behave and that tells it how it should act when the user provides a certain type of data. So what I want to do here is basically split up my instructions and my prompting into 3 main sections. This is where when you hear people talking about like prompt engineering or kind of figuring out the right ways to interact with AI tools in order for those AI tools to be, more accessible or have the right responses or, come up with wrong answers less often, right? This is where we start to break down how I want to approach that. And so the way that I tend to break down this process is in 3 main sections, 3 main categories of my instruction set. The first of those categories is going to be what information I expect the Rovo agent to receive from the user. So when I am chatting with this agent, what am I going to give the agent and what does it need in order to function essentially? The second category, so that second section, will be what it's going to do with that information. So I'm going to give it the information and it's going to know what type of information to expect, but what is it going to do with the information once it has it? That's going to be our second section. And the third one is just going to be how to send the information back. So what format does it make sense for us to receive the information back from the agent in order for that to be valuable? So I'm going to start here by going to that first section. And what I want to do is start to describe to the agent what it's going to be. So I'm going to say you are an assistant that is helping to see which clients are working with a financial services or working on forms. So are working on forms with a financial services organization. And basically what I want to do now is, now that it kind of knows generally the type of agent it's going to be, I want to say what we're going to provide to the agent in that first section. I'm going to say the user, or you could say, I actually use the word invoker usually. We'll talk about why in a bit. Basically, you can also trigger an agent with more than just a chat interface. And so it might not actually be a user interacting with it. It could also be an automation. We'll show an example of that later on. And I've just found that invoker is a more general term Doesn't really matter. Your mileage may vary. That's the word that I use in case you're wondering why. It's because automations could also trigger this. So the invoker will provide here. Let's see, it'll provide you with the name of a form, which is going to be typically formatted as a number followed by a letter. So essentially I have that form like 207B or 711A, and these are going to be kind of generally the structure. So as a number followed by a letter, and I'm going to actually just go ahead and give it an example. So I'm going to give it an example format of 207B. That'll be kind of my example that I will give it so it knows generally what the name of a form is going to look like. And now what I want to do is actually tell it, do not proceed. Make sure I type that correctly. So do not proceed until you have been given that form. It's been given a form. And the reason why it's important to do this piece here is that I want to make sure that the agent essentially knows what it needs in order to function correctly. So I'm actually going to even be more descriptive and say you will not be able to answer without that information. Because now this agent is going to be aware of the fact that if it doesn't have these pieces of information, it is not going to work. So what it might do is actually prompt the user to say, hey, give me this information. Your first prompt didn't have all the information I needed, and I therefore can't function. So it kind of talk to the user a bit more and not proceed and try and do things it doesn't have the ability to without that data. So that's really our first section. That's that area where we're passing in the data that we're going to send to the agent. So now it knows what type of agent it is. It knows what it's going to receive from the user. In that second section, what I want to do now is tell it how to use that information and kind of what to do with it. I'm going to say here, you will use that form, the form name, to search through all the issues in the form tracker, or the key is FT project. Now later on, I'm going to actually tell it to specifically only look at the FT project, but I'm going to be more specific here just because it doesn't hurt to give it additional specific instruction to only look in that project. And it's going to be to find any issues that reference that same form. So basically I'm going through here and telling it, go through that project and find any issues that reference the same form. What I want to kind of expand on here is, what is it going to consider an issue that is talking about the same form, right? So if I have a particular work item that says, hey, I'm working on form 207B for this customer, and another one that's a different customer with the same form, how do I tell Rovo to consider those either the same form or kind of the same area or something different? So I'm going to go ahead here and say, in order for an issue to be included in your response, it only needs to contain the form name in one text field. So basically I'm telling it, if you find the form name, I'm even going to type this out, if you find the form name on any part of the issue, include it in your response. So this is me basically telling the agent, here is your criteria for what is considered part of the response you should give back. And I'm going to also tell it a bit more specifically to look at the summary and the description. So summary, description, and actually, I'm going to say look at the summary and description of each issue to try and find the form name. So I don't necessarily need this last sentence, but I just want to be as specific as possible. This is where you really want to be descriptive to the agent for what it should be searching for, how it should be searching for it, and the way it should be kind of interacting with those different pieces. That's going to be a very important part of this agent functioning more consistently. So that's really our second section as well. Now we've got the first one being the information it's going to expect to have sent to it, the second section being what to do with that information, and that third section being what to send back to the user. So now I'm going to say send the invoker or the user a table as the response. And I want to tell it specifically what's going to be in that table. So the table should include the issue key. I actually want to also include the name of the client, because the real purpose here is to determine which other clients or customers are going to be filling out those same forms. The summary is probably good, and then a link to that issue. Now, what I want to do here as well is I did just tell it to include the name of the client, and this is also kind of some unstructured data, right? In our board, we don't have like a custom field that keeps track of the particular name of that client. Instead, we just have in the summary, the name is somewhere in there. So I'm going to specifically tell it to find the client name by searching through the text fields for a last name with a prefix specifically. So basically that way it knows, hey, what I'm trying to search for, I can find if I look for a last name and a prefix before it. That'll be considered the client name in this table. And really I've defined my 3 sections here. What I want to talk about a little bit as I've gone through these 3 different sections is how at the end of the day, what I'm asking this agent to do is kind of just one task. It is to find all the other clients that are going to also be filling out that same form. So in general, we want to be, as a general mindset, starting small and then iterating from there. And the real purpose behind this is because AI is kind of this big buzzword, and we tend to get excited about it and want to try to use AI to solve every problem. And AI is kind of, in a lot of ways, inherently hard to find the issues in. And if it starts to break and not work over time, it's harder to figure out where those issues are happening. So what we want to do is start very small, have it do one task. And then if it does that one task well, we can add a little bit more to it. And then if it breaks, we know that that little piece we added is that part that was breaking the process, right? So essentially we want to start as small as we can, as simple as we can. And then over time, we're going to be adding more and more context to this prompt. We're going to be adding more and more tasks for it to do, parts of the automations that we might integrate later on in this session. And it's going to be basically that process of starting small and iterating from there to make sure that you know what breaks as you add each small piece at a time. But this is my initial setup. It knows what data it's going to receive, how to deal with that data, and what to send back to the user. Now, conversation starters are also a thing that you can enter here if I wanted to like give it an example of a form that you might enter in, right? Essentially, this is going to be the options that when you go and chat with this agent later on, the user can click on these to just type that out without having to type it manually. You don't need to include those, but it's kind of helpful for users if you do. Now, the next section is going to be the knowledge section. This is where I was talking about kind of paring down the access of what a Rovo agent is able to actually utilize as data to function. So by default, we're going to have access to everything across the entire instance. So essentially anything that you have an external connection to, anything that you have inside of your Atlassian tools, it's going to have access to that all by default. Now, what it will do is respect the user permissions. So it's a really important thing to note that all of your Atlassian tools already have user permissions and different people can access different content. And without having to do anything, it will only have access to the data that the user interacting with that agent has access to. So no need to worry about that front. That's also true about the external connections. So if I go and connect like SharePoint to my Rovo connector there, it'll also ask me to kind of sign in as a user to SharePoint and make sure that each individual user of the platform is only able to access what they can normally access both on the Atlassian side and those external tools as well. But what if I want to pare it down further than that, not just what they have access to, but a little bit deeper? So if I leave this box unchecked, it has access to everything. If I check this only reference these sources box, what I can do now is basically tell it, in this case, I want it to just access a Jira project called Form Tracker. And now it's only going to have access to the data from the project Form Tracker, which is this one that we're working on right now. So now it's not going to go be finding like issues across different projects and kind of having these problems arise from searching more data than it should have access to. This is a really powerful section of Rovo. This is where you get that value of paring down your scope to just what you want it to have access to. The last thing to look at here is actions. So actions are another very powerful part of Rovo, where if I go in here and add an action, I'm basically describing to this Rovo agent things that it's able to do on a user's behalf. So the value of Rovo goes beyond just finding information. It can actually do things for the user, like creating a work item or adding a comment to a page or a work item, or finding some similar issues. It can do really a lot of things across the board. And you basically describe through these actions what Rovo should have the ability to do. Now, I will say that I'll caution you a bit with these actions that the value that they bring is usually going to be seen from if you're interacting with an agent in chat and you kind of don't have the ability to tie into other tools like automations or kind of writing code behind this. So if you have a scenario where you want to build a Rovo agent and you really want it to be kind of interacting with a Jira project as things are happening through the workflow of that Jira project, well, we can actually use an automation to do that, and we will be doing exactly that here in a bit. So there are a lot of times where automation can fulfill these same roles without needing to rely on the actions to do it. And it's a bit more consistent because automations work the same way every single time, whereas AI is a bit more, it's not quite an exact, count every single time it does it the same way. So these are very valuable when you're having like a chat agent that needs to do some actions, but I tend to utilize the automations to solve a lot of those problems as well. And that's going to be how we handle it in this case. I'll build that automation here in a bit. So we've basically gone through our 4 sections and created a Rovo agent. I can go ahead and activate this Rovo agent and kind of wait for that to load here. And what I'll be able to do now is go from this agent creation back to my board. I'm going to refresh it to make sure it shows up, and we can test out the agent. So if I now go into my chat window, go ahead and pull up agents, I'm going to search specifically for that formerly agent. So there's formerly, it does show up, which is nice. And I have that, conversation starter of 207B. I'll just go ahead and hit that. What it should do is now search through all of my issues, find all of the items that have the same form name in it, and you'll see it gave me a table with all the issue keys, all of the client names, and it also has the summary and a link to that issue. So I basically have now very quickly here created a pretty useful agent. If this was an example of having all this unstructured data across the environment where I want to find, who's actually working on these forms, I've now built an agent that does that. I can do the same thing for, let's say, form 711A, and it will give me a table for that one as well. Now, this is an example of, these financial forms and kind of discovering which of these clients, and it's kind of a smaller data set, obviously, but this is really an example of Rovo handling unstructured data in a way to get value out of that unstructured data that wasn't otherwise possible. Because there's no consistent format here. There's no way for me to just programmatically or kind of like in a consistent way find these bits of information without having Rovo go through and find that for me. So I'm utilizing Rovo as a way to understand unstructured data in a way that's going to present it back in some value propositions and later on in automations that we weren't able to access before because that unstructured data wasn't something that we could reliably utilize. So what I want to do is kind of go one step further and integrate this with something that's actually happening rather than just information we're receiving, right? So what if I don't just want to have the user go and chat and ask for who's filling out 207B? I actually want to, whenever somebody creates an issue that is about form 207B, I want them to get a comment on that issue saying, hey, you've created an issue for this form. Go ahead and look at this list of anyone else who is filling out that same form, and that'll allow us to kind of like get some more information as we're actually working in our process that already exists. So we're going to use automations to do that. And this is actually probably my favorite feature of Rovo because we can take what we just showed with a custom Rovo agent, integrate that with automations, and all of a sudden we have this really powerful engine of taking what we can already do with automation in Jira and Confluence and integrate AI value into that entire process. And it allows us to kind of open the doors to a whole new world of AI value. So what I'm going to start by doing is actually going to go create a automation, and then we're going to end up creating another Rovo agent a little bit more quickly this time, but it'll be used in this automation as well. If I hit create rule here, if you have not used automations before with Jira, it's a really powerful tool, and you can do a lot of things in here. Essentially, what I want to do is give it a trigger, and that trigger will be when a work item is created. I could probably just type work item and go find that. So whenever I create a work item, it's going to basically automatically run this automation that will trigger all these different actions I'm going to set up. So if I go in here and hit next, basically I have all these options of what I might want to do. And what I actually want to do here is this new action we have from Rovo called use Rovo Agent. Go ahead and connect it. What it's going to allow me to do is actually talk to a Rovo agent as if I were kind of in the chat interface, but through this automation. So the user will never have to open up the chat window and actually enter this in. When they create that work item, it's going to automatically send the message they might otherwise send. And that's going to be what creates the chain for getting that value out of Rovo. So what I want to do here is I actually am in a different scenario before where I previously was able to just type in as my prompt like 207B. and that was going to go to my formerly agent and give me the table that I needed. But now I actually don't know which form I want to type in here. I have no idea because I am creating a work item that anybody could create with any type of form name, right? So what I want to do is create another Rovo agent, and that Rovo agent, it's going to have the job essentially of finding from the work item that I just created, what is the name of the form that it was created for. So I go back to kind of this create agent screen, and I'm going to do this one a little bit more quickly. It's a little bit shorter as well, which is going to be good here to kind of get back into the automation context. But I'm going to skip to our manual setup and I'm going to follow the same process. So I'm going to start with the name. I'm going to call this form finder. Its job is going to be to find a form in a work item that I just created. And I'm going to skip the description for now, just for the sake of time, and go straight into the instructions. So in here, I basically want to say the invoker will provide you with the summary and description of a work item, and you will need to find the name of the form that that work item is referencing. So basically just describing, like we did before, what it's going to be doing. I basically can take the same format that I had from this other one where I had each of these three sections. And I actually know I'm going to probably use this same sentence of kind of the typical format of a form, right? So the form name, I can say here, the name of the form is typically formatted as a number followed by a letter. Here's the example format. That's going to be our really the only thing we need in this first section. All it's doing is taking in the summary and description and determining what the form name is for that work item. Now, I don't actually want it to do anything with that information, so I'm going to skip the middle section and go straight to how to send it back to the automation, because this is really something that's purely for the purpose of finding a bit of information and passing it along to another agent in a second. So I'm going to actually chain both of our agents together, where this agent is going to be finding the form and the formerly agent is going to be using that to build our table. I'm going to go ahead and say here to return just the name of the form without any other words. This piece right here is very important. So as you're going through the process of building these agents in automations, be very careful about the response you get back from the agent going into those automations, because in this case, the structure of that could actually matter quite a lot. So we're actually going to use this to not only trigger the other agent, I want to add a label to each of those work items for the name of the form that it has to do with. That way, we basically are using this unstructured data to then use AI to find the data that should be structured and create like a label in there that creates a more structured way of, in the future, filtering it out, right? So we're basically utilizing Rovo to turn our data that was otherwise hard to search through into much easier to query types of data. And I want to make sure that I just have the form name in order to make sure that doesn't break anything else. I'm even going to tell the agent, you will break things if you return anything else. And if you tell it things like this, it tends to help keep it consistent, so it's not doing things that it knows is going to break other areas, right? We want to make sure it doesn't do anything other than return just that name of the form. In the knowledge section, I actually want to check this box and give it nothing. I don't want this agent to do anything other than analyze the information I expressly passed to it. So I'm going to actually remove all the other references to that data. So I actually don't want it to access anything in Confluence or Jira or any of these other tools. I just want it to have access to the information I passed to it in the automation directly. So I'm basically telling it, don't access anything but that. I don't need any actions. I'm already in the context of an automation. This is where I was talking about, if you're going to be using automations anyways, use the automations to handle the types of things that actions would otherwise do, because they're going to be more consistent, because AI is not necessarily going to always create a label in the same format, but an automation absolutely will. So it's a good way to utilize the tools for what they're good for, right? So AI is really good at understanding this unstructured context and giving us value out of it. Automations are already great at consistently doing something based on user interaction or different ways of the workflow being triggered. Use both of those tools for what they're good at, and the combination is very powerful. I can go ahead and activate this, and I'm going to go right back to my rule builder for my automation and show you how I chain these two things together. So starting from the perspective of this first part of my automation, where right after the trigger, I want to use a Rovo agent. I'm going to go ahead and use that agent I just created. I might have to refresh here just to make sure that I get access to it. And that form finder agent is going to be that first agent in the chain to allow me to essentially go and find the correct form to use for my formerly agent that I'll use here in a second. So work item created, hit next, go ahead and add my Rovo agent. And this is going to be that form finder agent, which will get the prompt of my summary and description of the work item that was just created. If you have not done this before, this is what it looks like to provide what's called a smart value in an automation. No worries if it's kind of a little bit beyond what you've done in the past. Essentially, it allows you to take whatever the values from the issue that triggered this automation and use the data from that issue to pass into this agent in this case. So this is actually going to be the summary and the description of the issue that was created, or the work item that was created to trigger this automation in the first place. If you click down here, you can actually get a good list of all of the available smart values. It's a really good way to kind of get some more dynamic content in your automations. The next thing to do here is I actually want to create what's called a variable. So I'm basically going to store as a new smart value. So those things I just showed, those smart values, I'm going to create a new one called form name. I'm going to reference this later on and use it later. And this is basically just going to be a way to store the name of the form that I found from that previous Rovo agent. And in order to assign that value, I'm going to use this agent response smart value. This is the piece that's new and kind of added by Rovo here. So Rovo is going to allow us to basically take what we're doing in this use Rovo agent action, and it's going to give a response. So I'm going to basically send a prompt to that Rovo agent, and the response that comes back will be available as this agent response smart value. So now if I go into the next part of my chain, I'm actually going to go ahead and create a label on a work item. So I'm going to edit this work item, and I can select the field for a label. And this is all kind of the basic functionalities of just using automations, but I'm using Rovo as the cue and the key to kind of interacting with these automations, where now I can basically add a label using that form name smart value I just created. So now it's actually going to pass the form name as a label to this work item as it's creating it. So now I've basically taken a way to create structured data from that harder to search data I had earlier. Now, the last thing I want to do here, and this kind of last piece, is going to be to use another Rovo agent. So I've basically used multiple Rovo agents here to do individual parts of the process. This is where, as you start to get to more complex workflows, you'll want to make sure that, like I was saying before, an AI shouldn't, like a single agent shouldn't solve everything all at once. You should have individual pieces of value and use those individual pieces of value to accomplish the overall goal. In this case, we're putting it together in an automation. It also means that that form finder agent and also this formerly agent are both now agents that can be reused in other parts of our environment, right? We can use formerly to chat with it directly like we were doing earlier, but we can also use it to just go ahead and pass in the form name and use it as part of an automation. And so now we basically enabled ourselves to utilize this agent in more than one way, rather than making kind of like a single use type of tool. Now from there, what I can do is go ahead and add a last action here to leave a comment on this work item. And that comment will just be the agent response. Because basically what I want to do is take the response from formerly, the agent we were chatting with earlier that we created, and add that as a comment to this work item. You'll notice as well, you get this as comment as option. So I basically tell it who the entity or persona that's leaving this comment should be. I want that to be formerly. That's who's actually creating the table that's going to be sending it back. Those personas start to become things you can use here to create more traceable ways of basically tracking down, did an AI create this or did a user create this? And if I were to leave this where the user that created that work item had left the comment, essentially, that would incorrectly show that they left a comment that they maybe actually didn't, and the AI did that for them. So now we can, in the work logs later on, track down exactly who left that comment, and it was this formerly agent. So now that I've built this automation, I can go ahead and turn on the rule. I'll give it a name here of, maybe find form on create, turn on the rule, and I want to go ahead and go test this out and basically just create a new work item and see if that worked. So if I go ahead and jump back over to my board, I can create a work item. Maybe I say Mr. Jones is also filling out form 711A. Go ahead and create that. It'll maybe take a second for Rovo to kind of finish all of its processing, but what we should see on this work item now is once it loads, we should get a label, and we should get a comment. So we'll give it a second to run and do its thing, and it will give us both of those things based off of that automation. And this will kind of complete that cycle of having, the first agent that we created to use that with chat. And then now we've created an automation that, as you can see, has now left a label. That label is this 711A label. And we've also left a comment where, without having to interact with this as a user anywhere, I already have a comment on this work item with anyone else who's filling out the same form. So maybe the purpose of this is that if I'm sending out the form to Mr. Jones, I should also be sending it out to these three other clients. And it is going to be helpful in that way to be able to kind of add value to the processes already happening. And of course, you can start to see that this is just one example of all the unlimited things you could do with automations and Rovo together, and how that can really be a really powerful way to integrate AI value into the processes that already exist in your business. So that's pretty much the end of what I wanted to show from building an agent perspective. We have some time here to fill out questions. Please, once the little quiz comes up, fill it out. We need to have people fill that out for it to count for the official attempt for Guinness World Records. So I will be answering questions, and as I am doing that, the quiz will show up, and you'll be able to kind of answer all of those questions. You don't have to get them correct for it to count for the record, but you do have to fill it out, and the first 500 who fill it out will also get a gift sent to them. So go ahead and do that. It is in your best interest if you want to get that prize, and also helps us to get to that official attempt. So let me go ahead and pull up my Q&A here, and I can kind of start answering some questions while that's happening. Okay, so I have a question about with the connectors, how do we handle security or sensitive data or isolating things not to search? So this is basically done by handling it from user permissions. So if we want to handle with these external connectors, all these other tools, it's already going to kind of out of the box handle the ability to narrow down what it has access to based on the user that's interacting with it. So as a user would go to Rovo search and kind of ask for a question and kind of ask for information, it would ask them to hit this connect button essentially and kind of go in and also log in as their user in both platforms so that they have only the things they would have access to and kind of pare it down that way. So there was also a question about if the chat has features like ChatGPT, like writing code and image generation and kind of those different parts of AI tooling. The answer is yes, but not available to the public quite yet. So there's kind of a whole suite of development agents to help you write code and build things. It actually goes along with one of the areas we didn't quite get to for time's sake today, is that you can also build all of these agents with the development platform of Atlassian Cloud that's called Forge. So as you build things and write things in Forge, you can actually directly integrate those with the tooling you've seen here in Rovo. And part of that will also be that Rovo is going to have tools that allow you to integrate with your code editor along with Bitbucket and your actual pull requests going through and help you do some review on those, generate code. So those things are coming from Atlassian. They're kind of in early access right now, and we're playing around with them as we speak, essentially, but those will be coming. Okay, the question is, in cleaning up Confluence before Rovo becomes widely available, while archiving old spaces, remove them from the searches. Yeah, so essentially Rovo is going to have access to anything that's in your instance. So if you remove them from the instance or archive them in a way that they're not like active data, then it shouldn't be accessing them. This is also where the ability to create agents that are pared down to a certain set of kind of documents or a certain set of spaces and pages in Confluence will be really valuable there. All right, so another question is, can we as Jira Confluence global admins restrict access to Rovo from regular users, but be able to use it ourselves? So this is actually kind of a question that leads into a bit more of the philosophy behind how we want to integrate Rovo in an organization. And it's really that Rovo only has access to the things that those users already have access to. So you wouldn't necessarily want to restrict a user from getting AI value on top of the data they already see, right? So there's not really a way, as of right now, to say only these certain users can actually use Rovo, because from a value statement perspective, you're going to get the most ROI from allowing all of those users to utilize Rovo on top of the data that they already will have access to. Get a question as well about if we can set the knowledge source to a specific connector, and that answer is yes. So as you're looking at this knowledge section, you can see that the connectors are also options here. So Figma is a connector, and I can say just pull from Figma in particularly. So I could actually have an agent that's just for searching things in Figma or one of those connectors, which is pretty cool as well. All right, we've got a question about what is a Rovo agent versus a Rovo dev agent. Dev agent's kind of that thing I was talking about before for helping you write code and things like that. That's going to be basically just a differentiation of a dev agent being a category of a Rovo agent that's specifically designed to help with code. So for actions, is there an official actions library? Can third-party customers, etc., add specific actions to that list? So that's a great question. So the built-in actions that come from Atlassian will just be there whenever you use them, whenever you use Rovo out of the box. So these are the built-in ones. You can also build your own actions using Forge. So if you're using the kind of development platform that we have to develop on top of Atlassian Cloud, which is called Forge, you can build actions from Forge, you can build agents from Forge, but if you build just an action, it'll actually show up on this list as a new thing you can access. And so essentially the answer is yes. You can have even like marketplace apps that add their own actions. You can do all of that type of thing. When you integrate this with Forge, and you have to write some code around it to do that, but it basically just ties everything into your software development lifecycle and process, where if you already have developers behind the scenes kind of building other things in the rest of the organization, what you can do is have those developers build a couple actions and basically write any sort of code and really expand the possibilities of what you can do with Rovo in that way. All right, so let's see. Looking through some of these questions as well. Some of these are duplicated. All right, so I had a question about what is my opinion on the difference between making an automation versus creating a Rovo agent. And this is where you really want to be looking at what is the value you're getting out of Rovo in a particular scenario, right? What is the thing that Rovo is doing for you that AI is specifically helpful in order to do? And that's where we were talking about, like, I use the automations to do things like creating a work item, or I'm using it to kind of add comments and add labels here, edit the work item, a whole lot of different things for, basically typical things automations can do. What the automation cannot do on its own is understand this summary and kind of unstructured context, compare things with Confluence, find this other data, and kind of like do all of that contextual analysis that AI is very able to do. So automations on their own can't do that, but when you pair that with Rovo, now all of a sudden you have these two tools together working in a way that's very powerful. All right, let's see if we have any other ones of these questions. Make sure to submit that quiz as well. We've seen some people enter those, but we're still looking for some more of those quizzes. So we still have a lot of people on this call. Make sure to fill out that quiz so that it can count towards our attempt. Once again, it does not matter if you get the questions correct. Just make sure you fill that out, and it will allow you to kind of be entered into our, ability to win that prize, get that sent to you, along with getting enough people for the official attempt as well. All right, looking through to see if we have any other questions as well. Answered a couple of these already, some duplicates. I had a question about, can I build a Rovo agent that helps me build better Rovo agents? That's actually a great question, because the the default Rovo agents you get sometimes from Atlassian are actually Rovo agents that are designed to help you learn how to build Rovo agents. So absolutely, they have context of how to build themselves, which is kind of cool. So you can kind of build a chat agent that's able to, access and find ways to build other Rovo agents, which is kind of a fun little AIception type of thing. But yes, you can essentially build agents to help with any sort of context. And so that actually leads into you might actually want to build agents that are specifically to help users build new AI agents in your instance in ways that are maybe specific to the way that you want to incorporate things with that particular project. Or maybe you have like, for our organization, we build agents this way, and so you want to do it that way, and kind of a lot of different ways for us to be able to integrate Rovo, and you can certainly build agents that can help you build other agents. So the question was, can you use a Rovo agent to trigger automations for Jira and Confluence, which is a bit different than what we showed here, right? We used an automation to trigger a Rovo agent. Can we use a Rovo agent to trigger an automation? And the answer is pretty much yes. So we can especially do that as we start to integrate things like Forge and writing some code behind it. But really what we would want to do is use the Rovo agent to like do some action in the environment that would then trigger the automation, right? So there are going to be a lot of scenarios where we're going to have an automation sitting in the background. We want to make sure that the kind of Rovo agent's triggering that. So we set the trigger to, hey, this field has updated or changed, and we use the Rovo agent to update that field. In the future, we might see more direct ways to just say trigger an automation from directly from the Rovo agent. I believe some of that stuff is coming, but as of right now, there are ways to accomplish that. It's just kind of depending on how you want to integrate that into your process. All right, looking through some of these questions.
While Joshua's looking for that next question, if you guys are struggling to find the quiz to get that completed, please feel free to check the Q&A feature or the bar at the bottom of your Zoom, especially those of you joining mobile. That will be where you can locate that quiz to get that submitted.
All right, so I have another question about, can you use Rovo to analyze JSM tickets to find trends in common ticket types? The answer is yes. We actually built for a customer a way for us to basically, whenever a JSM ticket is submitted, it will search for similar tickets across the environment and provide potential resolutions to those tickets based on similar tickets that were already resolved. So we have examples where, if you submit a ticket that's similar to one that was resolved a month ago, it'll actually give you the resolution and what happened to resolve that ticket a month ago. And that way you don't spend too much time looking for that. I had a question as well about how can we assign the agent response and the automation. So if I go back to the automation to a variable instead of using the agent response directly, and I'll go ahead and kind of talk about why that was. So if we look at this scenario here, I have two Rovo agents in here. And so the question was, when I'm using agent response to just assign a variable and then using that later on, why am I doing it that way where I could just have put agent response here? The reason why is because I know I'm going to want to use this form name more than once, and potentially because I have more than one Rovo agent, I might actually have conflicting agent responses, right? So once I get to this next layer down, let's say I wanted to use the form name further on in the automation. Well, now agent response would mean the formally response, not the form finder response. So that question is kind of one that gets into more advanced use cases, but where we tend to store it in a variable like that, just so that, and we have multiple of these agents talking to each other, we can keep track of which data is coming from which agent and kind of not have that issue happen there. All right, let me go ahead and just looking for questions to answer here. Make sure you're still filling out that quiz. I had a question if SharePoint is a connector that's available on the list. There is a SharePoint connector. So that is one that you can utilize when you go and actually, I was looking at, it was Rovo Search. So SharePoint is actually showing up right here as a thing that I could connect. I would just need to go and actually connect this, sign into the admin account on SharePoint and make that connector start to function there. All right, so I have a question about the privacy. What privacy protection does it have? And I cannot give access to sensitive company information onto the Atlassian servers. Yeah, so this is where essentially it has the same privacy as anything else in the Atlassian platform. So if you're using information that is already accessible to the Atlassian cloud platform, that's going to be the same sort of security, and privacy concerns are handled there. So things like SOC 2 are already handled. And ISO 27001 is also handled for Rovo and Atlassian Intelligence, which is one of the other AI tools that Atlassian provides. So all of those things are handled. In terms of what it's doing behind the scenes from the AI perspective, it is going to be sending some queries to OpenAI for some of those answers, but that's basically handled in a way that is kind of obscuring some of the things it's sending, and it also is using a lot of internal models inside of Atlassian directly to handle the fact that it doesn't want to send everything just out to OpenAI, right? It's using it for the value it can get out of OpenAI with all of kind of segregated and secured servers on OpenAI's side, but keeping all the things that are kind of inside of the system as it can be in the Atlassian side of that equation. The question here was, will we get a VOD version of this presentation? This is being recorded, so we'll go ahead and be able to send that afterwards. So you'll be able to kind of go back and kind of see all of the content here and make sure that you're able to track it and keep track of all the things following. I know I did a lot of content really quickly here, so it might be helpful to go back again and re-go through that video. So you will get access to that as well. I got a question from someone that I actually know here asking, what's my ideal Sunday with Rovo? Well, I suppose it's not a Sunday, but setting a world record with Rovo is pretty cool. So I guess that's the ideal day with Rovo for the day. All right, can Rovo control a Forge app? So you can use Forge to create a Rovo agent, and you'll be able to basically build Rovo agents and actions and be able to kind of track all of the different things that are happening with your environment through Forge and use Rovo as adding value to it. You're not necessarily using Rovo to directly control the Forge app. You're more using Forge to develop a tool that uses Rovo as part of the value that it can bring. The other question was, how can I make sure that Rovo won't hallucinate? That's a great question. This is why it's actually really, really important to look at those knowledge sections as you're creating an agent. So you want to make sure that, like in this case, I didn't want Rovo to hallucinate about the name of that form. So in this scenario, I want to basically tell it only show the things that are coming from the automation that you're being given. And that's going to be a really important thing to do there. So it's going to be basically narrowing down that knowledge is the best way to continue making sure it doesn't hallucinate. That's going to be a good way to get that value out of it. Right.
Joshua, I don't mean to interrupt you because I love the track you're taking with answering all of these questions. And I know we've got a ton more, but I did want to interrupt because we beat the record. I did want to share a quick little video from Andy that he shared. Oh, do you mind unsharing your screen, Joshua? I'd like to share this short video. Here we are. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and please enjoy this celebratory video.
Now time for us to reveal the results for your official attempt.
Valiantys and Atlassian, We've received your evidence for the Guinness World Records title for the most users in a software video lesson, and our team of highly trained record specialists have reached a decision. The record to beat was 500, and I can now confirm that your attempt to break the record has been successful. Congratulations, Valiantys and Atlassian, on achieving a new Guinness World Records title for the most users in a software video lesson.
On behalf of Guinness World Records, it's my pleasure to present you with this Guinness World Records title. Congratulations, you're officially amazing. We are delighted that we can be part of this official record event and hope to see you all attempting and breaking Guinness World Records titles in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. I don't know about you guys, but I got goosebumps. I was very excited to watch that, and I'm so glad you guys were all able to join us in this monumental and historical moment. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Joshua if he has any more questions he wants to answer. I know for a lot of you, we're at the end of the day or at the early morning of the hour, so grab some coffee, kick your feet up, and close out your day. But thank you all for joining us if you do have to head out. And if people still have questions and want to hear more from Joshua, stick around. We'll answer a couple more questions. At the beginning, I did toss in the training email address. If you guys do have more questions and do need to head out, please feel free to email us after today. We would love to continue answering questions and help you out as you may need. But with that, thank you all for joining, and we're so glad you're able to come.
All right, well, that was really exciting to see. I'm glad we broke that record, and I will answer a couple more questions here, and then we'll go ahead and close it out. So I have a question about what the advantages of Rovo will be over other LLM providers. One of the big ones, and I think we were able to see that here, is just the direct communication with all of your Atlassian tools. And really, that's when you have an organization that's directly tied into all the work that you're being done is in Atlassian, right? Atlassian is your knowledge management, Atlassian is your work management, and you can use Rovo directly in those tools, integrate elsewhere, brings all of that together. It's going to be a great thing to do. The other important thing to talk about here is the fact that Rovo is available for everyone to access. So there was an announcement at Team 25 that essentially there's a free version of Rovo available to everyone on any instance, and you can essentially utilize Rovo and test around with it and play with it. Best way to learn Rovo is to just try some things out. So I encourage you to do that. We're going to hear more about the long-term licensing plan from Atlassian in the coming months, and we're working with them to kind of get all those details. But right now, you basically can go and reach out to Atlassian, get it kind of a demo going, and have access to it to play around with it, try all the things I just showed you here, and learn how to use Rovo in your organization. All right, well, we've got a lot of other questions. I'll kind of go through them. We might be able to respond to them by email as well. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach back out to our training email that should be sent out as well. But for now, let's go ahead and close it out. I know we're kind of a little bit over our time, but thank you everybody for showing up and for filling out that quiz and helping us get this record, and hopefully you have some success with Rovo in the future.
Thank you guys. And thanks again for submitting that quiz. I know many of you are so excited to receive your thank you gift. Keep an eye out this week for an email from one of our team members to get that gift claimed. Again, thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you at the next world record we break. See you later. Bye-bye.